While we're all here, we could just
Okay. I don't know if we should
let's
be
do it.
quiet or what.
I'm going to play it, and we'll go from here. Ready?
You go.
Thanks so much, everyone, for watching. We've got an epic lineup tonight of speakers.
Hang on a sec. I'm going to start again. I didn't share the sound. Sound. There we go.
We've got an awesome panel here.
All right, here we go.
Thanks so much, everyone, for watching. We've got an epic lineup tonight of speakers. We've got an awesome panel here. Amazing group of functional doctors, technology, activists for a leap forward in medicine. Our goal is to make it easy for practitioners to learn in community. This ecosystem that is being set up by the meetup groups, we believe will be the future ecosystem of this evolved primary care network, and it all revolves around you.
Welcome to the Functional Forum. Thanks for joining us in the charge to accelerate the evolution of medicine. Please welcome your host, James Maskell.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Functional Forum. We have a great show in store for you tonight. We have with us today Dr. Jeffrey Bland, the godfather of functional medicine. We have Dr. Chris Turnpaugh. He runs one of the most successful functional medicine clinics in the country, and we have a really exciting topic here today. As we were just coming on, Jeff, I know you said that it was the 10-year anniversary of this conference. Well, 11 years ago today, in a basement in New York, was the very first Functional Forum, and so here we are, alive and kicking, and it's amazing to think what's happened over the last 11 years.
Things short of spectacular. I would say that beyond any of our imagination as to the evolution dynamics, I would call it the almost meteoric increase in recognition of the constructs that underlie functional medicine, which just is never. It's amazing to me continuously. Let me give you an example, James. This is a real world example as of last week. I think this tells your story. So my wife and I stopped at lunch at this local restaurant, natural foods restaurant, and we were sitting there, and I could overhear the conversation. There were two women and a gentleman at the booth away from us, but I could overhear their conversation, and I thought I heard the words functional medicine, and I couldn't help myself, so I became an interventionist. I went over and I said, I'm sorry, I know this is a little bit strange, but I heard the word functional medicine, and I just wondered, are you familiar with this concept? And then the woman turned and she said, this concept and its formation and practice has revolutionized life. And she would never have been the same if she was even alive today if it were not for functional medicine. And I said, well, wow, that's quite an endorsement. I should probably give you some disclosure that I'm one of the people that was fundamental in starting this movement some years ago. And then she said, so who are you? And I said, well, I'm Jeff Bland. And then she screamed and yelled and stood up and carried on. And then her husband, who was sitting across the table from her, said, oh, my word, I can't believe that we're meeting you because you're a topic of conversation all the time. My wife's life was truly saved by a functional medicine practitioner in our area. She was 175 pounds heavier than she is today, as you see her. She had every possible metabolic disorder that you can imagine. She was being treated with over 20 medications. And as you can see her today, without anything other than doing the functional medicine model, she is now free of all of her medications, has lost 170 some pounds, and her parameters are all absolutely stellar in her energy and everything. And it was so good that I went to the doc, and now I've lost 56 pounds and feel better. And I was taking GLP-1 agonists, and I completely got rid of them, and I lost more weight, feel better, and all my parameters normalized. So you're talking to the right people here at lunch. And so I thought, well, there is a pretty neat little endorsement. This came out spontaneously. as to how this concept is spreading in its understanding, but also, most importantly, spreading in its positive impact on people's health.
Yeah, 1,000%. Well, that's actually a great lead in for what we're going to talk about tonight, because we are talking about metabolic mastery, and I'll share this. This is, we are actually going to be talking about an upcoming event that we have that we'll be putting on. We are live tonight, so if you want to ask questions of Dr. Bland or Dr. Turnpaugh, you can tweet them to me with hashtag Functional Forum, and I will pass them on. But this is the event. It's the PLMI Summer Mastery Conference. Both Dr. Bland and Dr. Turnpaugh will be speaking there. And Jeff, you're always good at coming up with topics. So unraveling the interplay of liver function, mitochondrial activity, and chronic disease. Why this year, this focus, and what do you think is being missed in sort of the greater metabolic medicine world?
Yeah, thanks, James. So, I'm very proud, and I guess number one, that we're into our 10th decade in this conference, and I think it demonstrates that the term metabolic mastery, although it appeared a little esoteric when we started it, has actually been a pretty good hook to hook our program onto, because over that decade, people have started to recognize the extraordinary number of chronic illnesses that are associated with metabolic dysfunction. And it's surprising to me that when I think back 10 years ago, we all probably knew of well, not probably, we did all know about the term metabolism, but I don't think its understanding as it relates to how it contributed to dysfunction was well understood 10 years ago, or well accepted. And so over the years, as we started to develop this theme, each year focusing on a different aspect of metabolic health and its connection to clinical signs and symptoms, I think we've started to see not only a rising visibility, but also a rising clinical awareness and a rising technology of understanding of how to actually intervene, and how important personalized lifestyle healthcare or medicine is in this particular milieu. When Dr. Minnick and I wrote the article entitled Personalized Lifestyle Medicine that was published in 2013, we were surprised to learn that in the peer-reviewed medical literature, the Medline PubMed literature, that we were the first article in the title to use the term personalized lifestyle medicine, which I know sounds crazy because it sounds like such a commonsensical thing, but I think it demonstrated that what we might have considered to be commonplace because of who we hang out with and who we talk to was not commonplace in the field of healthcare in general. And so over the last 10 years, as we've started to apply personalized lifestyle healthcare medicine to chronic conditions under the guise of metabolism, metabolic dysfunction, it has allowed us to kind of navigate this interesting pathway of systems biology in healthcare. And so this year, the 10th year, I think landing on this interconnection among the gastrointestinal milieu, which has to do with the microbiome, which is not just solely related to the bacteria that live in our gut, although those are really important, but there are all sorts of other kinds of protists and archaea that live within our digestive tract, including the microbiology. And now we recognize that the presence of certain kinds of fungal species, we always used to think of as not good. There are certain mycological organisms that are really important for health, as there are some that are over in their expression that are associated with not so good a health. And so as we start to examine the connection between the complex microbiome with that of the gut immune system, which is sitting adjacent to it in proximity, the so-called mucosal associated lymphoid tissue, and how that interfaces then with systemic health, then you ask, well, what's the next step downstream? We eat, we drink, influences our microbiome. Our microbiome speaks to our gut immune system. Well, where does it go next? Where it goes next is where it drains to, which is the portal blood system that delivers it directly to the liver. So the next part of our journey is to say, well, what do we know about liver function? And I think it's not surprising to learn or to remind ourselves that the liver has unbelievable number of things that it does. It's not just a metabolic organ, it's an endocrine organ, it's an immune organ. It has all these multiple functions as well as an excretory organ and a detoxifying organ. So it has all these things that it's doing simultaneously with different cells within the liver itself. And it's then communicating through the release of its own messenger molecules, things like interleukin-6, which come from liver function, the liver immune function, by the way, which 10% of the liver are occupied by Kupffer cells. And the Kupffer cells are the same origin embryologically as are the cells that occupy our gastrointestinal immune system. And they're the same cell origin that goes into our brain that we call the microglia, because the brain has an immune system. So here we get this crosstalk of communication between the gut microbiome and the liver into the nervous system, and actually even into the central nervous system. And then they're interfaced with the vagus nerve and this whole system of nervous system activity that's associated with experience, because we know vagal tone is influenced by the environment we're living, under stress, not under stress, activity versus non-activity, all these things, toxins versus non-toxins. So now we started to develop this system that is allowing us to kind of understand in that patient where the upstream origin of some of their problems might reside. Some people, maybe it resides principally in the gut. Other people, maybe it resides principally in the signaling associated with the liver. Others, it may reside mostly in the intervertebral or interarticular spaces with regard to macrophages. Others, it might be in the microglia of the brain. So we start to actually piece together as a detective how these things all interface. And then we look at personalized, individualized care based upon where we think the weakest spot or the most important spot in that system lies for its restitution. So this year, it's this connection between the gut microbiome. And of course, we happen to be very privileged because I think arguably we have one of the world's experts in the gut microbiome, Dr. Rob Knight from UCSD, head of the American Gut Program, highly published, one of the original leaders in the microbiome field. So he's our leadoff kind of opinion leader to set the tone as to what's going on in microbiome science and its relationship to this downstream series of activities on our immune system. And then we have a whole cascade of other presenters that will take that lead and start talking about, okay, where does that signal go to and how does it influence health? And then what do we do about it? So one of those obviously is none other than our extraordinarily esteemed Chris Turnpaugh. And Chris Turnpaugh really will bring to us a clinical mastery, validating our title of our program, Metabolic Mastery, that we try to go to the clinical leaders in the field to interface the science with clinical outcome. And so Chris Turnpaugh, who I've known now for more than 2 decades, I've had the privilege of interfacing with Chris, gee whiz, I don't think we've counted the exact number of years. Maybe we shouldn't because it tends to age us, but certainly more than 20 years. Chris and I have been working collaboratively and really pursuing the same kind of thinking. And so I think this meeting, this conference, our 10th annual Metabolic Mastery Conference, James, is going to be a real knockout of the park opportunity to get news to use that clinicians will really find maybe has a slightly different spin than they're accustomed to.
Beautiful. Well, one of the things that I've appreciated over the years, having come at least to the last 7 or 8 of these, I think I came in 2017 was the first one, but been to many of them, just sort of like how we go from the theoretical to the practical over the 2 days, and people leave with really great ability to implement. And we'll get into some of the other speakers, but I'm so glad you introduced Dr. Turnpaugh here, and I'm grateful because having heard about your clinic, Doc, for years, and then having met you 2 years ago, we are now coming 1 week ago that I actually visited and showed up in Pennsylvania and drove from DC to come and see the clinic, and not only see the clinic, but also meet some of the practitioners. I think there's 18 providers there providing amazing care, 85 staff, 5 locations, and then we got to take a tour of the next location that is up there. So I guess I just want to reflect to you that I've been to some wonderful buildings of the delivery of functional medicine over my 20-year career, but there was something about the cohesion that you've created between the providers there that I've never witnessed before. And I just want to share my appreciation for that, because it's one of the things that we've seen time and time again is just that individual clinicians can get very excited about functional medicine, take 10 years of extra education and do an amazing job of supporting people. But building a clinic where there is real cohesion, the doctors work together and the outcomes are the same across the practitioners because of that interconnection is proven quite hard to do. And I think that you've done an incredible job from my experience there. So thank you for being part of the Functional Forum for the first time on year 11.
Thanks for having me. It's a privilege and an honor. Thanks so much.
So when you hear Jeff talk about this topic, and you're right in the middle of Pennsylvania, so arguably, in the middle of, where this medicine is needed and serving that sort of population, how does this resonate with your day-to-day experience of treating people with metabolic dysfunction and all of the ways that manifests into chronic illness?
Yeah, so if I reflect back, I do like to date myself because it seasons us. And I remember going to my first conference in 1996 with Dr. Bland, and got kind of thrust into it as a know nothing. And it was a wonderful ride, kind of drinking out of the fire hydrant, and just seeing how it's evolving, and touching on what Dr. Bland said in the beginning. I had a conversation with my brother yesterday, who's not in the field, but my biggest supporter, but thought I was crazy 30 years ago. And now it's an idea whose time has come. And now it's everybody. So everybody, he comes around, he's, hey, I heard about your brother who does this functional medicine thing. Is there any way I can get in to see him? And it's now not this outside the box thinking, it's what people are seeking out. And I think we're seeing that. We do have 5 locations and 20 providers, so we have a bit of a bullseye. But when you get 500 new patients calling every month, and every office is doing this, it's people are seeking this, they want this, and what I love about, like you touched on, is our clinic is we all have clinical roundtables and we get together, and I mean it's the way probably medicine was done years and years ago, where doctors got together and they discussed cases and tried to figure things out and what are the commonalities. But we don't put everybody in a protocol and they don't fit under a bell curve, and we're looking for those unique individualized dysfunctions, and we look to take care of I don't feel gooditis rather than a named condition with an ICD-10 code. So what's your I don't feel gooditis, and what's the mechanism of action for that I don't feel gooditis? And when you look at that from the 10,000-foot view and bring it into the individualized patient, it always comes around energy medicine. And energy medicine isn't woo-woo stuff. It's how's the mitochondria functioning, and how's that gut feeding the liver, and is that liver talking to the brain? So if you're not at least conceptualizing how this interplays with I don't feel gooditis, then you're missing a huge piece of the physiology. So if you're not looking at, hey, is this normal in this patient? So when is that fungi pathogenic or opportunistic, and when is it really helping and supporting us? So we're not, you have this bug, so let's kill this bug because the scientific literature says kill that bug. Well, when is it synergistic? When is it needed? When is it supposed to be there? When is it overexpressing itself? When is that talking to the liver, telling the liver to do its job, but the liver doesn't have enough energy to produce what it's supposed to produce? So it's producing these inflammatory, oh gosh, I'm in trouble, excitatory things. And then that sends a message up to the brain that talks to these deep nuclei in the brain that says you're in trouble, which is a stress response. When is that physiology, the appropriate physiology, acting out in an inappropriate way? When is it the normal physiology that's expressing itself incorrectly because it can't get out of its way? And that's what I think of when I think of like energy medicine. It's really, is that gut microbiome, is your microenvironment of the gut able to communicate to the liver? Does the liver have enough energy to not just detox, but produce the proteins and cytokines that it needs? And is that communicating to the central nervous system to say everything's okay, let's just function as normal? And then when it goes on for long periods of time, how does that central nervous system adapt? How does it develop plasticity in these pathways that are pathological, but they're normal adaptive pathways to the physiology that you've been under for years and years? And that's a different model than what I call strep throat. You have a bug that you got to get rid of. These are the chronic conditions that we're seeing today, and the chronic exposures and the chronic adaptability that the body's going through. And it's not a simple fix. It's not, you have this imbalance, we're going to fix it by taking this certain pill for the ill. It's, how do we adaptively change this back? How do we support and nurture this human physiology back to a state of normal accommodation to the environment that it lives in? So normal stimuli create normal responses, as opposed to a normal stimuli causing an extraordinary response because of yesteryear that you've been exposed to. So how do we go about unwinding that whole stew of how you got to where you are, as opposed to you have this, so we're going to apply this? It's not just simple application for what's going on. How do we unwind that? How do we make that physiology healthy? How do we go to the next step and make sure that the next step can handle the pressure that we're putting on it? How do we do that? If we're not interplaying gut, liver, brain, that's part of it. That has to be part of the conversation. And even if you use the right modality and the right formula, and the tissue isn't ready to handle that right formula, it's going to break. So how do we help to facilitate correct physiology so that it can even handle it? And that's where I see, even in our office, to be humble, sometimes it fails because it was the right application at the wrong time, or the right physiology change at the wrong instance of physiology's ability to handle that change.
Jeff, I think one of the things I wanted to ask you about with regard to what Chris just said, because it's so true, is as you shift from a medical operating system that's quite simple and algorithmic to one that obviously has a large degree of complexity to it, and is honoring the truth of the body as a complex organ. And if you just listen to what Chris said there, I mean, the amount of like artistry that it takes to understand pattern recognition, intuition, connection, reading data, to understand the physiology well enough to reverse something that has that many features. One of the reasons why I think it's been hard to get doctors to, en masse to understand this is that it's intellectually rigorous.
Yeah, I think that I don't want to diminish the commitment that any student has to make to get through their training and to become licensed in their scope of practice. I mean, that requires a level of dedication to learn and apply to memory certain things that you can then give back upon demand, generally on a test or some kind of a certification exam, to demonstrate a level of competency. But I think that there is a significant difference between knowing the facts and knowing the story. The story requires, as you just said, James, an understanding of how the facts connect themselves together. The same facts can be woven together into many different types of stories. We know that from good fiction writers. They can write stuff from things that other people make it sound boring, and their stories are glamorous with the same history. And so the construct of understanding how these are interconnected moves us away from the digital belief of learning to the kind of system interface of learning. This concept of how things are in fact interconnected through this web of life or through a network like biology. You don't have to be necessarily, and maybe even to some extent it's desirable not to be an expert in all the piece parts of how you understand that system, because a lot of this comes by just changing your intention as to how you're going to assemble your information and giving yourself the permission to form the right kind of network connections. Because our brains, all of our brains are capable of doing that. Maybe some brains are more capable than others, but all of us can do that if we were given both the permission and the training. And so I think what masters like Dr. Turnpaugh can provide is a model how we can retrain the way we think about the observations that we make with a patient and how we interconnect those observations together into a different story, a story that, some people call root cause or upstream, that allows us to understand origin. So the advantage we also have today, which we didn't have when I started in this field, now, gee whiz, 50 years ago, actually, crazy to think of, um, is we have information processing tools. Um, Now we have AI and machine learning. We have Chat GPT that can assemble information in dramatically rapid ways beyond our ability to remember all the facts. But we can access those tools, and we'll be talking about that to some extent during the course of this Metabolic Mastery course, about how you can use these tools to help augment and speed up and streamline your information processing system. And those they don't take away the genius of the human mind or human intelligence or consciousness, but they are just another toolkit for scaling and making more efficient how we do this. Because one of the things that we've all been challenged by is we only have so many hours of the day. And if we really want to scale this, we got to get this to more people. Well, part of that is getting more people doing it, but also part of that is making those doing it more efficient. And so that how we use these information systems, how we use them to form the right kind of connections, so we don't have to memorize all the facts. What we need to know is how to do the interconnections. That becomes really a part of what I call mastery, the metabolic mastery. So that will be certainly a focus on this course, to listen to people like Chris, who have been students in their practices now for decades, that have ways in which they've accomplished that goal and can bring efficiently now the results of that learning to their patients, so it doesn't take them 2 hours to get to a conclusion, and that gives them more opportunities for serving more people.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And yeah, Chris, maybe you can just, share like some insight on that. I mean, what have been some of the key ways that you've been able to help the other clinicians that come on into your team get their head around complex chronic illness? And, if you compare the way that you think about complex chronic illness today versus the way that you did in 1996, how do you sort of shunt all of that information to the next doctor?
Well, one of the ways is, I wouldn't practice the way that I did 10 years ago or 5 years ago, or hopefully 2 years ago. So to everybody, it's be a learn-it-all, not a know-it-all, and just keep trying to learn is a huge piece. And you don't have it figured out. And the other thing I'll say to a clinician that's coming on, or even a lecture I'm giving, you're not going to learn it all. You're not going to learn from a lecture. You're going to learn information, but you're going to learn by getting your hands dirty. You're going to learn by figuring it out. And sometimes a clinician will walk down the hallway and ask me a question, and I'll give them an answer, and I look really smart. And I say, kind of humbly, truly humbly, I know a thing or two because I've seen a thing or two, and I've seen a thing or two because I've been doing it for 30 years. So sometimes there's no substitute for experience. And we'll use AI. It speeds up our process. We'll use Chat GPT. I'll double check myself. I'll see that I'm not missing something. But Chat GPT can't give me 30 years of experience, but it can refine what I'm doing, shorten my learning curve, hit some blind spots that I might have seen. And then I still have to be, and I think everybody has to be still that skilled artist who knows how to apply it in the right methodology that comes from humble, hungry, and smart is a phrase we use here. So you have to be smart, but you have to be humble and hungry too. So, hey, what am I missing? What's going on here? What do you think? And nobody has it all figured out. And so the collaborative team we built, they'll sit with a clinician for 3 months before they're on their own, but then they have to get their hands dirty. And then it's okay to say, I don't know. And this is what I love about the functional form. It brings people together to have collaboration without an ego, to say, this is what I saw. Hey, maybe try this. Maybe it's wrong. Maybe it's right. But you want to be open and try to just have that community feel. And a lot of the practitioners who joined us, it's not that they were not competent on their own, but they love the community. They love being together. They love having 20 people in the same office to shoot ideas off of without an ego. So I think we shouldn't be afraid of new technology. We shouldn't be afraid. We should embrace this AI, but we shouldn't be afraid that it's going to replace us, because it can't give the artistry. It's not going to draw that beautiful picture of physiology application that we learn and interface with our patient and feel with our patient. And, we have these emotions that the patients have, and the ChatGPT can't pick up on a sadness or a happiness, or that it doesn't get that frontal lobe technology, or, it doesn't just get that reasoning and rationale that we have. So I think we should embrace it, and we should not fear that it's going to replace us. I know I've heard, oh, it's going to replace us. It's never going to replace the human interaction. It's never going to replace the fact that, how you go about your day rewires how you're going to go about your next day, and how that interface happens. And so I think putting it all together, like Jeff said, just, we need this because we need to be scalable, but we're not replaceable. We're just not going to be replaced by this artificial intelligence. We're going to embrace it and become better artists. We're going to become better clinicians from it. And I can tell you humbly, it's helped me tremendously. It's opened some blind spots, but it didn't replace my application, and it didn't replace my human interaction with a patient. It never is going to give that same human quality that we can give. And the other thing is, it's never going to embrace a sad patient. It's never going to love. It's never going to give that emotion that you can give. It's never going to experience the joy that a mom feels when their child is better, or vice versa. That you just can't get that through a computer. It's not going to happen. So I would just encourage people. You got to get your hands dirty. You got to get into it. You got to be not afraid to fail, but smart enough to know when you're outside your box, kind of know your limitations, but know when you can push them. You're only going to get better by doing and getting in the game. For Christmas, my clinicians got me the Man in the Arena from Teddy Roosevelt, one of my favorite quotes. And it's an honor to be in the arena, and it doesn't mean you win every game. It means you're in the game, and you're not criticized for those on the sidelines telling you made the bad call. So I think as clinicians, we come together as a group. We're humble, hungry, and smart. We're constantly sharpening our saw. We're refining it. We're not afraid of technology. We're embracing technology, and we realize it's not going to replace a human interaction and a human experience, which then goes on to change that person's human experience with everybody they meet. And it's that, better to turn on one light than to curse the darkness, and never telling how lighting one candle starts a flame. That's really what this movement has been since Dr. Bland started 50 years ago. And it's an idea whose time has come, and we just have to embrace that.
Yeah, well, you don't get 500 new patient, interest a month, but it takes time to build trust, build cohesion in the community. Yeah, I appreciate all the things that were said there. I'm wondering, you've now been practicing metabolic health before, during, and now kind of after. Well, I guess we're still in it. The GLP-1 moment, right, where this blockbuster drug has arrived. What does doing metabolic health in your practice look like now compared to pre-GLP-1, and how do you work with people who have very clear ideas of their own about what this thing does, now that where you're in the clinic that does root cause resolution, but also patients are being marketed to, and maybe want your expert opinion.
Well, I think that GLP-1s serve a place. I do think they have a place. I think that I was one of those, to be honest, that was adamantly opposed to it, because I thought this is the wrong way to go about it. Turning off physiology, or shutting off physiology, or supporting physiology that much, I was very much against it. I had a lot of naysayers fighting against me in the clinic. Ultimately, I had the final say, which is not always good. And so I resisted it. We played around with it a little bit. We did some microdosing, and I saw that there's possibly, and I could be wrong. I start every conversation off with I could be wrong, but I think some people's physiology has been broken. I think it's just not been, I think something happened in their past, knowing their story, that some of these pathways were broken. Sometimes you need stitches to heal a wound. The body just can't heal it on its own. So I do see that there is some application. What I don't love is it's just become, there's your answer. And that's the answer to everything. And so we're not fixing problems anymore. When you put 6-year-olds on a drug that's going to downregulate their body's own production of this, I think that's a mistake. I think we're making leaps of faith over the Grand Canyon that this is the answer to everything. And it's not. We got here for a reason. We got here because something went wrong, and we have to figure out what the thing went wrong is so we don't repeat it, so we don't just have an ongoing generations of this. So I think it's a shortcut, and I think some people want a shortcut, but I think there's more people now that want to know how to fix themselves. They want to know how to get where they're going. They don't want to be dependent on the shots the rest of their life. And so I've softened my stance because I try to be a learn-it-all, and sometimes when you do that, you're wrong a lot. And I was wrong. I think they do have a place in some instances, and I think they are supportive in some instances. But you also have to learn how to jump off the tiger without getting eaten. And you can't stay on this tiger forever. You have to get off. You have to figure it out. You have to realize when you're losing weight and you're losing muscle mass, what the problems are with that. I'll tell you a quick story. The drug rep came in and they said, and I was channeling my inner Jeffrey Bland in this conversation. So they said, hey, it's actually a neurotransmitter. And I said, great, it's a neurotransmitter that's released after you eat. Yes, that's what it does. I said, so you're using this and the half-life is 7 days? Yes. So when is the last time in mankind that we've ever had GLP-1 in a high dose when we're sleeping and not eating? So you haven't even studied that. You're telling me it's a neurotransmitter that affects brain function in a way that's never been seen before in mankind. We should use it blindly because it's so great and it's being released while you're sleeping, which has never happened before. Shouldn't we be looking at that? Shouldn't we be looking at all the effects? If you're touting this as this major magical neurotransmitter drug that's released after we've eaten, I don't know too many people that eat when they're sleeping. So let's take a step back. Let's look at the side. Let's look at what it's actually doing. Let's look at the mechanistic action. Let's see how we can mimic this through normal physiology. Let's work our way backwards. And then we have to ask ourselves, if the machinery is broken and it needs a GLP-1, then why is it broken? How did we get here? How are we not going to reproduce this in our children's children? How are we going to stop this from needing to be 74% overweight in the United States? How did we get here? So I've softened my stance to not say never. Never is a bad word, and I did use it early on. Never. We're not using that. That's not who we are. That's not functional medicine. That's not root cause. Maybe I was wrong, and I was wrong because I've seen mood changes, and I've seen anxiety changes, and I've seen autoimmune changes by using low doses of it. So I had to eat crow in my own office to say, maybe there is something to this, but it's also not the Holy Grail. We have to figure out better ways to support human physiology. We have to figure out better ways. We have better energy production on a cellular level. We have to figure out better ways to do that. And we also have to ask the question, how did we get here as a population and what drove us to this? So with the GLP-1 huge explosion, I think it's some good, and it can be a miracle. But I think if we rely too heavily on it as the Holy Grail and the answer, we're doing a disservice to mankind.
Yeah, agreed. Well, Jeff, you mentioned Rob Knight a little earlier, but I know there are some other amazing speakers you got lined up for June. Austin Perlmutter, always strong. I saw him a few months ago in Mexico. He did a wonderful presentation, really got them fired up about the brain. Christine Burke, who we're going to speak about here shortly. Who else have we got on the list?
Well, I think one of the other sages, clinical sages, along with Dr. Turnpaugh that we have is Shilpa Saxena,
Yep.
who also works with multiple clinics. She's kind of a sage leader, educator from her years of experience across, I think, something like, I think she has 85 clinicians that report into the various organizations that she's active in overseeing. And so I think you get a lot of good information from people who have their fingers in many pies, which Chris is an example of that. And it's not just their own perception, it's that which they get back from the feedback from other dedicated people that are part of their organization. So Shilpa will be there talking to us about how you not only engage with the patient, but how you make this from a procedural perspective, how you make it successful in the practice. And it probably does no good if you're the world's smartest clinician, but you can't make it work in your practice such that you can't keep the lights on. So I think that Shilpa will bring some of that wisdom, both from a clinical perspective and a mechanistic organizational perspective to us. We've got a really great contribution to the program that I've been hopeful to get him into one of our programs. That's Edward Walker, who I met many years ago. He's New Zealander. He's a PhD, but he did something, or he is doing something, that is quite novel in the New Zealand academic agricultural field. He convinced the New Zealand government to fund a program that would look at phytochemistry of natural products grown in New Zealand to see if they couldn't develop some unique positioning. And one of the things they landed on, because they grow fairly well in certain regions of New Zealand, is Humulus lupulus, which I happen to have quite a bit of experience with. It sounds like the wolf, but this is hops, common hops. And common hops takes me back to many years ago where we did all sorts of work in our research group on the more than 100 different phytochemicals that the common hops plant makes that have physiological activity. And we now see that they affect satiety, they affect GLP-1 secretion, they affect insulin sensitivity and signaling, and they affect inflammation. And so Ed Walker is coming all the way from New Zealand to share with us some of this really remarkable work they've done, both starting in animals, but now clinical human trials. I think he'll be reporting on a new human clinical trial, the results of which will just be available for our June meeting for publication on weight management and appetite-related regulation using some of these unique hop molecules. So I think that'll be an interesting part of the story of things we can do. What are some of the new ways we can harness nature to produce positive outcomes in metabolically disturbed individuals? We also, I think, are going to have a tremendous contribution to the program with Lisa Portero, Dr. Portero, who is going to be speaking about this emerging connection between the gut microbiome, our immune system, and our bone. And, people might not think that somehow the microbiome's connection to their skeletal integrity, but actually there is a really great connection, and she'll be exploring that with you and what you can do about it. And then, of course, this whole big area of the liver, and I went to the cleanup home run hitter for talking about liver metabolism, because I know he delivers the news to use. It's always, wide and deep, and that's Tom Gillums. So Tom is going to be speaking about liver-related dysfunctions, nutritional support for liver, and how we've changed our view of liver from NASH, liver pathology from NASH, non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, to its new term, MASH. And MASH is metabolic associated hepatohepatitis. And so it's a whole different kind of thought about how does metabolism influence liver fibrosis, fatty liver infiltration. And so Tom will be sharing with us some really good new news to use with regard to various things that nature has given us that we now know have positive impact on both liver fat infiltration and liver fibrosis.
Wonderful. Well, look, we've got a lot coming up, and please join us in Chicago on the 20th and 21st of June. I'll be there with the cameras. We'll be doing interviews, incredible guest speakers. I wanted to just take a moment to take us a little bit sideways here for a moment, because there's some other cool stuff coming up with PLMI that I wanted to share about, and because this actually connects all three of us here today. So coming up on March 4th, the day after the next functional forum, is a special presentation from PLMI with Dr. Bland, Dr. Dale Bredesen, who many of you know has been on the functional forum before and is a leading neurologist and sort of at the very forefront of reversing cognitive decline, and then Christine Burke, who's going to be another speaker there in Chicago. But I really feel, having seen what is coming with this, that this could be like an industry, transforming moment, because I think that, ultimately what we were just speaking about a few minutes ago is that, what has it taken to go from an idea to, a community of doctors working together to reverse disease at the scale that it exists. And you can see that in Mechanicsburg, PA. If you have a chronic illness, you've got a shot at reversing it because of the capacity that has been built by Turnpaugh Health. And ultimately, it serves as an example of that is the level of capacity and more that we need, all across the country to reverse, cognitive decline at scale. And as someone who's been involved with Christine since the beginning in her forging of True Neura, I'm very excited about it because I feel that like we are on a precipice where some of these tools can become useful enough for practitioners to grow and scale. So Jeff, I know you've been prepping on that one. Am I right? This is going to change the world?
Well, James, I think this is actually a 1-2 punch, so to speak. I think anyone that considers going to our June course, and even if they can't make the June course, should be at this virtual March course. This is groundbreaking, the work that combination between Dr. Burke and Dr. Bredesen. To think that there is a way using personalized lifestyle intervention that we can reverse what was considered an irreversible condition associated with those unfortunate to have some kind of genetic predisposition called Alzheimer's or dementia. This is a frame shifter, both in terms of the concern we all have about maintaining our intellectual capabilities as we age, but also as a marker for all conditions. If you think of the brain, we've always been told in our study that in neuroanatomy that brain cells, once they're formed by embryology, you better hold on to them because if they're gone, they're gone. If they're changed, they're irreversibly changed. You can't go the other direction. It's a one-way street. And now what we're learning is be cautious about those things that have been held as truths for all these many decades, because the more we learn that those things are reversible. Now, maybe not at the speed that you can heal a wound where your myocytes can recover or your liver can regenerate itself, but there is a reversibility for these pathogenetic characteristics associated with dementia and cognitive decline that doesn't require immunomodulating drugs that are cloned off of some kind of mutant organism, but rather relates to things that we know how to do in the proper system of application. And I think what Dr. Burke has put together in conjunction with Dr. Bredesen is not just a small kind of iterative benefit to our field. It is a major frame shifter. So I'm hopeful everybody, there's no barrier. This program is virtual. You can just tune in at the time wherever you are. And if you don't get it, it'll be reshown later. But we'd like everybody to be part of this groundswell of transformation.
Wonderful. Well, I wanted to triangulate this with you, Chris, because you would be not shocked to learn, Dr. Bland, that Chris has, practitioners on his team who are good at this and know how to do it. But it created a very interesting opportunity with a local businessman partner who was, interested in taking this to his memory care center. And maybe you could just share a bit about that, Chris, because I think this is like critical to the transformation that we're seeing and what his vision is and how you see that we can support that.
Well, yeah, I'll start off by saying when I met Dale first, he did a lecture here locally at the local university, and we were there and we had a chance to talk, and he was excited about some of the things he was looking at. And I happened to say, what you're looking at is what we've been looking at because Dr. Bland told me to look at it 30 years ago. So it's the same idea. It's an idea that really, although it can be applied to cognitive decline, it's just applied to human physiology. And when you and I spoke and you're talking about this program, I'm like, this is a program for functional medicine. It's not really just a program for cognitive decline. But so a gentleman who runs a retirement community, a very large retirement community, over 55 community, where they move in and they can take them all the way from neurotypical function to they take care of them all the way through memory. He has set up the whole community of almost 1,500 people, 1,500 families. And we're starting a program where we're looking at the biomarkers before anything sets in. So we're getting to it before it gets to them, which I think is key. We don't want to treat it just when it gets there. While we can reverse cognitive decline, it's easier to prevent cognitive decline if we know what to look for and how to live that lifestyle. So they have a whole program where they set up where they're supporting the community, able to get the biomarkers, the risk factors, set up healthy lifestyles from environmental factors and food factors and supportive nutrient factors to actually trace them over time to see that they're reducing their inflammatory markers and looking at even people that have like the beta amyloid starting and the neurofilament light chain that's starting. We're reversing that. And I shared with him a story that we had a patient from Canada who's in the Canadian healthcare system who was in significant moderate cognitive decline. And I know that doesn't sound like a big deal, but moderate cognitive decline is where you can't remember your children's names or can't get where you're going home. So mild is you notice it, and moderate is when you're experiencing it. Severe is when you're really over the cliff a little bit. And by just applying the same principles that we do that Jeff taught me 30 years ago and learned, they were able to go in a socialized medicine, diagnosed moderate cognitive decline to neurotypical and no cognitive decline. So by sharing a story of an actual human being whose life has been transformed, he implemented a program to over 1,500 families to allow them to experience this. And we're going to track them over the next decade, hopefully, God willing, where we can see better outcomes than predicted. And I, again, am humble enough to say we're not going to hit a home run or a grand slam on every single patient, because that would be to say we have it all figured out, which we don't. But when we have, the only way we're going to get it figured out is by rounding this wheel even further and further and further and figuring out what our blind spots are. But to be able to have a community captured, know their risk factors, know their family history, know their expected outcome, and exceed their expected outcome and demonstrate their expected outcome, I think we'll have one of many instances where we have a population somewhat controlled who wants to take control, who's interested in doing it, and have achieved a greater outcome than statistically going to happen.
Wonderful. Well, look, there's a lot of exciting opportunities. I want to share with you, both of you, a story that you haven't heard. A few days after I was with you, Chris, I was down speaking at an event called Healthy Tennessee. And it was an amazing event. A functional medicine doctor pulled it together. He's one doctor inside a group of 120 allopathic doctors, but pulled together the Blue Zones organization. I spoke, he spoke, Patrick Hanaway was there, Joel Salatin, the lunatic farmer, that's what he calls himself, I'm not calling him that. We're all speaking, and it was amazing. The first day, you could just see the coherence building in the room for this desire to sort of build a healthy Tennessee from all these different angles. And it was really, really fabulous to be part of that. Then the next day, there was a morning session that was added to it. And the Tennessee commissioner for the Tennessee came to speak. And he hadn't been there the day before. And unlike every other speaker, he just had his notes and he had his presentation and he was just shooting through, big things that we've achieved and big problems that we have and so forth. And it got to the part, he talked about dementia and he talked about a few things there, but it got to a part where he was talking about fluoride and the reductions in dental fluorosis, and my knee just started to go and I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to say something. So I'm sitting there and I'm sitting next to Patrick and I'm looking to him, and I'm just not the guy that can sit there. And by the way, everyone else in the room, there's some functional medicine people, but it's mainly hospitals and food banks and large physician groups or otherwise. So anyway, this is me. It reached a moment where I couldn't not say anything. So I stood up and I just said, look, I was wondering, how has this presentation changed since the big meta-analysis that came out on the January 5th with regard to the loss of IQ? And at this point, I couldn't even hear what he was saying because my heart was beating. And I was like, I've stood up in this whole group and God, I hope I haven't embarrassed myself. So he says whatever he says. I actually can't even remember what he says. So I sit down and then his support guy comes around, the second in command in the state of Tennessee comes around and starts talking to me, and I'm not really listening to him either because I'm just like, what have I just done? Anyway, he gives me his card. So they leave, and in the time after that, about 10 people come up to me and say, hey, thanks so much for saying something. I wanted to say something, but I didn't have the balls to stand up and say anything. Anyway, so I got the card and I wrote to the guy and I was like, look, here's the meta-analysis that I'm talking about. I don't know that, but look, I actually don't really care that much about fluoride. I really care about dementia. And I know you mentioned you have now someone whose job it is in the state of Tennessee to oversee the whole dementia care for the whole state. And here are some things that I think, and this is some of the things that we have going on, and multimodal, disease. So I just feel like that's what I'm going to do with that card that I got for that moment. So then a few days later, I get a message from the head of dementia for the state of Tennessee saying, wow, your email was extremely intriguing. And just today I had the call with them, and you wouldn't believe the degree of openness to this conversation, because ultimately they know that it's a multimodal issue. They know they don't have any success in making it go the other way. And it's clear as day with what I said that someone is, that someone's having that success because it was in the Journal of Alzheimer's. And now, Dr. Burke has an average MoCA score improvement of 4.4. Anyway, I saw when the woman wrote back to me to say that she wanted to meet, I clipped it and I sent it to Patrick Hanaway, and Patrick said, he said that he learned something about standing up to authority from that interaction. That he was grateful. But, when you said earlier, Chris, that this is an idea whose time has come, I feel like, with metabolic health, we're always sitting in this place where there's this wonder drug and we're doing this other thing, and how will it work together, particularly with brain health. Not only is it really connected to metabolism, type 3 diabetes and all that, but also it's clear that there's something happening in our world that's not happening in their world, and there's no blockbuster drug coming down the road. Although, I've heard some interesting things about some brain inflammation stuff that is on its way. But ultimately, we already know how to reduce brain inflammation. It's functional medicine, it's personalized lifestyle medicine. And so I'm just really grateful for, for that interaction, and to see that the world is opening up to these ideas, because it's time under tension and proof. So
It is, but I have to say, James, that and not to be negative, but when I was doing that, they have the big hospital systems that come into these retirement communities, and there is still, we haven't done. I would just simply say we're on the edge, but we haven't arrived yet. They're still questioning. There's still, is there really any proof in the pudding? And so, and we don't get there with vinegar, we get there with honey. And so I humbly threw myself on the sword and said, let's see. I'm not doing anything that's going to hurt this community. Let's see where it goes. Instead of saying to them, you're wrong, I'm right, I'm not going to get anywhere with that kind of language. I'm saying, listen, I'm going to play your game by your rules. And my goal, I haven't done it yet, but my goal is to win the game by your rules, doing it better with your markers, and you do the outcomes, you do that. We're going to apply some methodology and hope for a better outcome. So I think, we do, I know because I've been guilty of it in the past, kind of going out there and instead of leading with a carrot, leading with a stick. I say we have to engage our counterparts in the allopathic world and demonstrate to them the efficacy of what we're doing on a scale that they're willing to have that cognitive dissonant change where they can say, wow, the aha moment that says, okay. And that's how I think we've gotten to this mushroom, even in functional medicine, is showing the outcomes. And so doing this in this community, I'm hopeful to partner up with the naysayers. And if you can change a naysayer, then you can change the world. And so I applaud the work you're doing and putting this all together, because we're not going to do it as an N of one. We're going to do it as a community.
Well said. Well, look, I'll just show you briefly. I've been busy in January starting blogging again. If you want to go to trueneuro.substack.com, we'll be talking about how wearables will finally make it into functional medicine workflow. God, it's been a pain in the butt for 10 years, I would say, with all the promise, but like a lot of frustration for practitioners. I think that's going to be solved soon. I think if you're interested in learning about this second practitioner problem, this is what I've sort of identified as something that is really critical in helping scale practices. and you will be hearing more about True Neuro as we move along. But imagine walking into your appointment and knowing at a glance how the patient is participating in their health, what is driving their dysfunction, and what might kill the patient in front of you so you can get ahead of it. All of that is to come. In the spirit of what you just said, Chris, we have some exciting things coming up. We'll be at the Environmental Medicine Conference coming up next Friday and Saturday in San Antonio. Excited to see the reemergence of that group after having a bit of a comeback. We'll also be on April 3rd. We'll be in St. Louis, Missouri. This is a functional forum community that existed before the functional forum came along and has really, I think, the most coherence that I've seen as far as practitioners who have built so much trust with each other over years of connecting, have great referral relationships. And so we're going to be heading to St. Louis to do a live forum from St. Louis. And, while we've been here, I just want to share, we've had a couple of questions and comments that have come in. But this is from a doctor in Australia, which is cool. You can watch this in Australia. It's like, it's Tuesday over there. It says, reading Dr. Jeffrey Bland's book in 2016 gave me the choice: take the blue pill and continue my career in medicine as I had already known, or to swallow the red pill and go on a journey into supporting patients in a different way. Well, I could not take the red one. So that's from Australia, and
Wow.
glad to see that it's having an impact everywhere. So thank you both.
James,
Yeah, Jeff.
James, I'd like to leave just a thought based on the conversations that both you and Chris have shared so graciously. So I'm gonna give a lineage, and I'd like people just to be thoughtful. I'm not going to give an answer, but just a lineage. And I'd like to ask the question after I give this quick lineage of events, whether there is some conclusion that we might derive out of this series of events. So the first was the discovery of insulin. The second was the discovery of corticosteroids, cortisone. The third was the discovery of hormone replacement therapy, I would call it in this case, horse hormones, equine estrogens. The next is fen-phen. The next is celecoxib. And the last on my list is PPAR gamma agonists. Is there any theme that is derived from those examples that I've just given you over history of modern medicine over the last nearly 100 years?
I'll give you the first shot of that one, Chris.
Well, I would say they all have to do with energy medicine. They all have to do with metabolism. They all have to do with how your body is utilizing, burning, and metabolizing fuels and substrates and liver function and how the liver talks to everything. It kind of goes to the theme of this whole conference.
Yes, it does. Thank you, Chris, for picking that up. It also, if you know in history, I'm sure if even you weren't living through all of this, every one of those drugs was received with extraordinary fanfare in medicine as a panacea. It would solve every problem. Insulin would take away.
How many of them have negative side effects today?
Well, you're heading right to where I'm going. You can add you can add GLP-1 agonists to this list. Every one of those drugs, every one of those major things was going to solve. We'd have no autoimmune disease. We'd have no diabetes. We would have no obesity. Every one of those drugs had a front edge of excitement. If you go back and review the literature, the social literature at the time, it was going to eradicate this family of conditions. And what did we learn? In every case, continued use of them, sustained use of them, led to people dying as a consequence of those drugs. There is a lesson here about how, when, and under what conditions use things that take charge of the body's biological processes. And I think we just relearn this story time and time again as if we're the first people to learn it. It is historic in the development of modern medicine. And it's not to say that any one of these drugs, including fen-phen, wasn't desirable for some people in some period of time. But en masse, as a group with no control over many months, you then start to turn the benefit equation the other direction. And now we have people dying. And now everyone disavows that they ever was be a prescriber of those drugs. Oh, no, I knew better than to prescribe those drugs. Of course, that was not true.
And you told me a long time ago that a lot of times medications can downregulate pathways greater than 90%, up to 100% sometimes. And natural medicines don't do that. So when we figure out how to work with the physiology and reverse the flow, it's not about turning things directly off and turning things directly on. It's about subtly working with physiology to restore normal function.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Rosiglitazone, right? Rosiglitazone was a PPR agonist drug that was going to prevent metabolic syndrome and treat diabetes and cause weight loss. And it did in some people for a short time until we started to see liver pathology and people dying of liver disease. So I think that there's a lesson here that you don't have to be a great student of history to understand the right thing at the right time in the right context. And the one thing that we know nature tells us is it has evolutionary history of being the largest study ever done, which is called natural selection. That's millions of years old. And so there's something about that we should be learning from.
Absolutely. Well, gentlemen, thank you for your participation this evening. I'm really looking forward to being in Chicago in June. You know, we've done a few Chicagos in April, and I've come back with that with mixed reviews. Jeff and I have sat at Cubs games in 40-degree weather, wondering why we were there. I think June's looking good. Good time of year to be in Chicago. Very much appreciate both of you being here this evening, sharing your wisdom, and look forward to that and many other times together in the future. And thank you, Chris, for being here, and thank you. Welcome to making your debut on the Functional Forum, 11 years in. And thanks everyone for watching, whether you're watching this live or you're watching